would you know what sin is if you're not taught what righteousness is? How would you know? You wouldn't. That's correct. You would think you were just living. We will be totally lost and without understanding, without the concept of what the opposite of good was. Never being able to perceive if we were doing evil or good. In the Bible, when Adam and Hava were created, they were made in a pure image of truth. They trusted each other with a perfect trust. Love took on an entirely different meaning. Just as today, we breathe in the air without thinking to do so. We expel carbon monoxide. We don't force our bodies to do so. No one ever had to teach us to do so. It just is. It is a natural expression of giving to all life. All human life, animal life, plant life. By the Creator. Love was brought about in the same manner between the two. Without having to be said, it was lived out in their lives. It was a natural expression of converting energy. This was life. They lived in a healthy state of connection. Just like you breathe and expel carbon monoxide, that's how they took care of each other. That's how they loved each other. That's how they lived. They didn't have to think about it. They just did it naturally. They just reacted, responded. You know, naturally, without hesitation, without even thinking, they just took care of each other. But today, we don't do things unless we're going to get something in return. The woman ain't good to the husband unless the husband going to be good to her. Why can't it just be that we're good to each other for the simple fact that we know that this is what we're supposed to do? Because that's how it originally was intended for life between husband and wife, man and woman, brother and sister, neighbors, friends. This is how it was naturally created to be. For us to be good, we didn't have to be taught to be good to each other. We were taught to be evil to each other. We were taught to kill each other. Well, with these teachings came a form of death. Because today's lesson is about death, spiritual death. With these teachings of how to be evil came a form of spiritual death. It took us levels of downgrading to get to that place. Where there is true love, there you will find trust, an absolute ingredient in love. One must ask, what is life? And if we don't have an understanding of life, we do not know whether we are living or dead. So what is life? Yes.
Life is the ability to convert energy.
Good answer. Do you understand what that means?
Yeah.
It's the ability to convert energy. Anything that is alive converts energy. It utilizes energy in one way or another. Even if it's not moving, it's still utilizing kinetic energy, which means motion.
So more it's like the ability to touch another person.
Even if you can't physically move your hands to touch another person, just by you being alive, you're converting energy because you're breathing. So you're converting that. See, remember the example I gave with the carbon monoxide? You explode out carbon monoxide. You're breathing oxygen, but you explode out carbon monoxide.
Right.
Plants breathe in carbon dioxide, explode out oxygen.
Yeah.
You're converting energy.
Right.
So even if you're alive, you're converting energy. Metal. Everything in the earth is alive. Everything in the earth in creation has a spirit. Everything in creation has a change. Yes. You can tell that metal is alive because if you leave it out in the oxygen in the air for a long time, it'll change. And what that change is converting energy. is a conversion stage. It'll change. Even water itself, which is teeming full of life, you let it sit still, it'll change. Everything is alive in creation. Even those things that you don't think are alive, they're alive. There are different forms of life. Okay? But life is the conversion of energy. Now, if you convert energy to a negative source, then you're evil. If you convert energy to a positive source, then you're righteous and good and just. You understand?
Okay.
So you can always move things around. It's about what you produce that make you who you are and what you are. So if we are bearers of truth and bearers of light, then the energy that we are converting should be what?
Truth and light.
Truth and light, positive energy. But if you find yourself constantly saying negative things, constantly getting into spiritual battles and conversations that are negative, you find yourself watching television shows and listening to songs that are all about negativity, then that tells you about the conversion of energy that you have within you.
Mm-hmm.
The process of converting that energy is negative, it's evil.
Because you enjoy that more than you enjoy peace
Positivity,
or
positivity and righteousness. This is true. Life is about, now we're talking about a spiritual death. We're not really talking about physical death necessarily, directly, but indirectly, yes. But directly, we're talking about a spiritual death. So we're talking about a spiritual life as well. And in this journey for spiritual life, you must convert that energy into positivity to life. Your conversion of that energy determines what type of life you actually have. If you're a person that always convert energy into negativity, you'll become a depressed person. You'll become a person that's not elevating to a higher level of understanding. You won't really be able to help people. Physically you might, but spiritually you're dead. So how can you give what you don't have? You can't. You might even can camouflage it for a while, but you're dead. Spiritually dead. The ability to convert energy into righteousness or evil will be determined by the spirit of the person converting the energy. If the person's spirit is dead, he cannot convert the energy into life. But on the other hand, if his spirit is alive, he can convert the dead energy into life. That means you can take a negative situation and make it positive. You can take something evil and expound on it and help somebody to get something great out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're taking that negative energy. Remember, we're talking about spiritual energy.
Mm-hmm.
You can take that negative spiritual energy and make it into something fabulously great. And you can bless somebody with it, where they can live again. Life and death comes from the types of food that one intakes into his system. This is a scientific fact. If one only eats cooked, now this portion of the lesson is so deep.
Mm-hmm.
And from this point forward, it gets deep and deep and deeper. But you have to travel and you have to pay attention to fully understand the deepness of it. If one only eats cooked or dead foods, his body will soon collapse because of the absence of life entering into his body. The body, in order to properly function, must have natural fruits and vegetables in their raw state, which contain enzymes, which in turn allows life to enter into the body, much like truth. Truth be the enzymes of life, spiritual life. Truth is the enzyme of knowledge in its purest form and must be fed into the human intellect and lived out throughout one's life, or else one's spiritual life will die. The knowledge must be pure for one to sustain, and if it is tainted with evil, it will not rest right in the mind of those who are spiritually alive, but will be at home amongst those who are spiritually dead.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that you will gravitate more toward the type of spirit that you contain is the type of things and people that you will gravitate toward. You can gravitate toward evil people because their teachings, their lives will be dead. Their spirituality will be deceptive and dead. But people who are alive spiritually, you will gravitate toward them only if you are alive spiritually. Like these lessons, you will find not interesting if you're spiritually dead.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're spiritually alive, you will be able to relate to these lessons because they're raising your level of consciousness, your spiritual awareness. They're actually giving you spiritual life. Genesis 2, verse 9. And out of the ground made the Creator to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the trees of knowledge of good and evil. And the Creator commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, remember the enzymes?
Okay.
Thou shalt not eat of it, for in that day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. If you continue to eat of the negative things in creation, the negative forms of life, then you, my brother, you, my sister, will surely die. If you don't feed your body, if you don't feed your spiritual mind by reading the laws of the Most High, by searching out the truth of the Almighty, by singing music pertaining to great and glorious things pertaining to the Almighty in your people, by being in circles of people who conversate and excel in conversations and actions of righteousness, of virtue, of loyalty, of respect, because you are the people that you keep in your company. That's who you are. So if you want to be spiritually alive, these are the types of things you have to do to constantly feed your spiritual growth. You have to eat spiritually if you want to spiritually stay alive. If you want to die, then go out into the world and let go of spirituality, let go of truth, and start living a lie, and you will die. And usually it's easier to die than to live.
Do you think a form of spiritual death is when you constantly reject,
Right knowledge?
yeah,
Absolutely.
like, for example, with children, and when you're trying to when you're raising them, and you're raising them in a form of modesty, especially your daughters, and they consistently reject it through either going to school with their cultural clothes on and changing their clothes at school, or when you tell them, hey, you can't wear that, they, cry out, catch an attitude. Would you consider that a form of spiritual death?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely on point. That's the beginning stages of spiritual death for a child. The rebellion against their parents' teachings and instructions.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. This is why the Creator commands for your children to obey your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Honor them. You honor them by obeying them.
Do you think you can alter that spiritual death if we also did what the Most High said, which is separate ourselves?
Absolutely. There's a large chance, a greater possibility of altering that spiritual death if you separate. Yes. Greater opportunity, greater chance of it. Any other? Okay. And you got to remember that, as I said earlier, being around righteous-minded people who keeps feeding your spirit spiritual food for life,
Mm-hmm.
that's a process of being spiritually alive.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly singing about the Most High. I mean, being indoctrinated with truth,
Yeah.
basically. It's an overwhelming, it's like charging your batteries. It's like a refreshment. And humans need to be refreshed daily.
Okay.
This death was when they ate off the tree of life, when the Creator told you not to eat off the tree of life, dark, good, and evil, this death was not an immediate death or destruction that is easily observed by looking on the flesh. You can't see that death right away. That spiritual death, you can't see it right away. And the person who is spiritually dying oftentimes don't even realize that they're spiritually dying. But when you get so far into spiritual death, you begin to feel void and empty inside. You begin to question your purpose as to why you're here. You begin to doubt the existence of the Almighty. You know? You begin to hate things pertaining to righteousness, and anybody that's in your life that is righteous, you begin to dislike. And you begin to be displeased with that individual. So if you're in a relationship as a woman, and you have an unrighteous man who's not feeding you spiritually, he can kill you spiritually. Vice versa. If you're a spiritual man and you have an unrighteous woman and your wife, and you're allowing her to remain in your life as your wife, she can kill you spiritually if you are not strong enough, and most people aren't. She will kill you spiritually when you begin to deny the Most High of His praise and of His glory. This is why you have to walk in the circle of people who are going to feed your essence spiritually so that you can become strong. If you hanging out with people and they smoke weed and drink beer and don't work nowhere and don't take care of their kids and sexing women all the time or sexing men all the time and just being foul with their lives, you should separate from that individual. Run from them. And when they begin to ask you why you don't come around no more, how come I call your phone, I can't ever catch you, tell them you want to live. And being around that individual is going to cause you to die. The death was not an immediate death or destruction that is easily observed by looking on the flesh, but it has begun. Just as evil enters the body, it first enters through the mind. Their minds had been altered. They had began the dying process, and they could no longer stand in the presence of righteousness, in the presence of the Creator. So what did they do? They hid themselves in the many evils that came along with the partaking of the forbidden knowledge found on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They hid themselves. When people who are evil, who have no desire to live righteously, are in your circle, sometimes when they get to a place where they can't convert or transform you into their evil lifestyle, they will begin to hide themselves from you. Because every time you come around, and when I mean hide themselves is they don't open up to you like they used to. Y'all not as close as you used to be. Everything you say irritates them or agitates them. They will begin to speak foul about you, talk negativity about you, either in your face or behind your back. One way or another, they're going to talk about you. They're going to separate. They're going to find reasons to separate themselves from you, ultimately until y'all are not together at all. They cannot reside unless you're giving them what they want, and they'll come around just for what they want, for that purpose. But when you try to feed them righteousness or positive energy, or here you go with that God stuff. And you ain't talking about God, you're talking about the Creator. But they won't be able to understand that. You're talking about righteousness, truth, justice, loyalty, honor, love. You're talking about all the things that they're not familiar with. They will run from you because you're not exciting to them. What they mean by that is that you're not feeding their evil spirit. As long as you're feeding their spirit of righteous and positive people, those positive people will gravitate towards you. Anybody who wants to better their lives, they will gravitate towards you. But people who don't want to better their lives, don't want to change their behavior, don't want to be the best they can possibly be, they will run from you and shun you and constantly get in arguments with you and debate with you and fight with you all the time because they are resisting spiritual life. In today's world, those who seek after righteousness are being tested with the same tree of life all over again every day. The Creator gave us a commandment and a choice, Jeremiah 10. He says, "Hear ye the word which the Creator speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Creator, learn not the ways of the heathen." He says, learn not the ways of the heathen. Then he gives us one of the heathen customs and practices. Well, the physical application of that practice of cutting down a Christmas tree has a spiritual and adverse spiritual effect on the body and the mind. Because you're participating in it, it has an effect on your mind as well. You will become spiritually dead. A lot of people say, well, I didn't actually go out and buy a gift. I just went over to their house while they was eating Thanksgiving dinner or eating turkey dinner or eating Christmas dinner, and I didn't buy any gifts or anything. I was just there. Well, you are spiritually allowing spiritual death to enter into you, to creep into you. Death comes through forms of a spirit. And everything that you participate and allow yourself to participate in brings about a certain type of spirit. Christmas being evil, the celebration of Christmas, if you're in the assembly of evildoers, you allow evil spirits to come upon you. If you got a whole lot of homosexual friends, but yet you keep saying you ain't homosexual, eventually you will be. You will have homosexual thoughts, homosexual tendencies, and the reason is because you allow yourself to be in a company of homosexual spirits. If you're in a company of people who steal, these are your acquaintances, these are your friends. Spirits are contagious. And although you may resist it for a while, you'll run into something that will break down your resistance, and the next thing you know, you're involving yourself in that spirit that you picked up from 2 and 3 years ago of evil company.
That's what I was telling the girls one day, that it's a saying that birds of a feather flock together. And I was telling them how they have to choose their friends wisely, because if there's a rumor about a girl or a group of girls that they're thoughts or they do things that they should not be doing, and you're hanging with them, then it's going to be assumed that you do those things too. Whether you know you do it or not, everybody else around is going to look at you like you do it too. And they're going to expect that of you because you choose to hang around those particular type of people.
Absolutely correct. And usually what happens is if you hang around those kind of people, you will eventually begin to do those things. It's just a matter of time before your defenses are broken down. It might take 2 or 3 years. It might take 5 years, but that spirit has already taken hold of you and you had not known how to get it out of you. And you could be strong and you will leave and separate from that person, and 2 or 3 years later, here you come vulnerable doing the things that you said you would never do. Deuteronomy 30:19. The Most High says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. He's saying choose life not just for you, but for your seed as well. Because the life that you're choosing for yourself is be transferred through your DNA to your children.
So it makes me think about in the Tanakh, the story of Cain and Abel, and how when Eve, Kawa, whatever name you want to give her, ate of the tree of life, and like you said, the Most High said, surely you will die. But it wasn't a physical death that she experienced. It was a starting of her spiritual death by going against the Most High. And not only did it affect her, because you just said, choose life so that your seed may live, it affected her seed. Immediately, she saw the rivalry between her sons. And one was a complete servant of the Most High, and the other one was halfway. like doing it just because he was living, but he wasn't doing it wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
And that just made me think about when the Most High said, don't, eat of that. And this is, what comes from that. And when we look at our children and we're like, dang, that child is so hard-headed or whatever. My mother used to tell me, she would tell me, one day you're going to get a child just like you. If you continue to be hard-headed and all of that, you're going to get a child that's just like you.
How funny.
So it makes me think about that at times when I see my children acting up. I'm like, I wonder if that was me, like to the degree that it is, or if they're even perpetuating it to even a further degree. You get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Good analogy. And the thing about Adam and Eve, I used to teach that years ago, that's exactly what happened. It was almost as if you were sitting in that class when I taught it.
No.
Yeah. That thou, Deuteronomy 30 and 20, that thou mayest love the Creator, thy Elohim, and that thou mayest obey his voice, and that thou mayest cleave unto him, for he is thy life and the length of thy days, that thou mayest dwell in the land which the Creator sware unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yisrael, to give unto them.
To give.
Virus, life sciences. Virus is an infection agent found in virtually all life forms, including humans, animal, plants, fungi, and bacteria. Viruses are not considered free living, since they cannot reproduce outside of a living cell. They have evolved to transmit their genetic information from one cell to another for the purpose of replication. You hear a lot of people say that this disease is hereditary in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Most oftentimes it's not. It's like a virus. They live off a cell. Well, those diseases live off of people and bad habits. Bad choices and bad habits. And if you're taught how to live by parents who have bad habits, you'll grow up with those same bad habits and those same results will come upon you.
Right.
And then you turn around and look at it and say, hey, it's because it's hereditary. It's not. Your behavior is hereditary.
So it's habitual.
And that's what the problem is. If your family has a case in history of heart disease, your grandmother, your grandmother's sister, your grandfather, your grandmother's mother, your grandmother's sister, now your sister and your brother, and you, they all have heart disease. Watch their habits.
Mm-hmm.
And watch the interlink in their lifestyles and the things that they eat. Usually it's the food you eat.
Mm-hmm.
If they sitting around, they ain't never running, not being active, not swimming, not jogging, not lifting weights, not playing ball, always sitting around, lazy, doing nothing, what that does is it breeds the same type of diseases inside of people.
Mm-hmm.
So great-grandmother did it, then your grandmother did it, and then your father did it, and then you're doing it, and your sisters and brothers are doing it, and y'all wonder why all y'all dying of a very similar disease. Usually the first thing you need to start looking at is your food.
Mm-hmm.
If your food is the same that your parents ate, and your grandparents ate, and your grandparents before them, and that sickness has been hereditary from that distinction in the family through that lifeline, it's very well possible that it's your food that's poisoning y'all, and the lack of activity that's poisoning y'all. Y'all have very similar traits and habits. Usually, that's what it is. Not to say that some things are not born in your blood. Not to say that some things are not. But the majority of them come from bad habits. And we teaching our children and our predecessors, well, you can't teach predecessors, but we're teaching our lineage to do the same thing. Just like a virus, it can't live off of the host, so those hereditary diseases die. And once you kill them, bad habits, you can also spiritually live. A lot of us are spiritually dead because our parents were spiritually dead. And our parents taught us how to be who we are today through their behavior, but we are living just like them, and now we see we're spiritually dead as well. When my mother wanted to commit suicide when she was 13, and my mother's brother wanted to commit suicide when he was 16, and now I'm 17, and I'm thinking about the same thing, but yet you have the same habits, the same living conditions, the same environments, pretty much to the T that your family lived. Somebody has to
Break it.
That's right. And the first place you break is with spiritual food. Your physical food and your spiritual food go simultaneously to give you spiritual strength. A few viruses also often damage or kill the cells that they infect, causing disease in infected organisms. A few viruses stimulate cells to grow uncomfortably and produce cancers. And a lot of people are dying from those cancers and don't even know it. Cancers that could have been avoided. Death. The act of dying or the state of being dead. It is called the termination of life. We're on page 4. This society in which we find ourselves in today has been infected with a virus, and all healthy cells or people which this virus or social system attaches itself to will soon die and mutate into evil, because the pure knowledge has been tainted with evil, and to evil minds evil is attracted. This just sums up everything that we spoke about today. If you find yourself desiring more and more of the worldly things and does less and less things to be closer to the Creator, you may be infected. If you are infected, you may soon become spiritually dead. But you won't believe you are dead until you examine yourself in spiritual truth. Ask yourself, are you fulfilling your spiritual purpose in this earth? Is your relationship with the Creator dying? Do you eat your spiritual foods daily? Do you attend worship services voluntarily? Or are you forced to go? Or do you not go at all? Do you make your daily prayers? Do you live out within your life the life of a righteous person? Or are your dreams and desires and actions about worldly desires? All these things question whether you're spiritually dead. The answer to these things. The people that established this social system was all evil. And all they can ever produce will be evil. That's all they can produce. Just as a virus comes upon a healthy cell and attacks it until it's totally annihilated, it so do the forefathers of this social system to the healthy lifestyle of every man and woman that has been born in here for the last 450 years. They have been, the forefathers of this social system have been the virus, their teachings. And it has infected everybody that's been born in this social system for the last 450 years. So that virus is killing them on a high level. We learn their teachings, incorporate them in our lives, and we're dying just like they died. The Father says in the book of Psalms, I believe it's 82, he says, you are Elohim, but you're going to die like one of the princes of the earth, because you have attached yourself to their lifestyle, their living, their ways of thinking, their social system. Every nation they go up against, they have to infect the inhabitants with the ideology of their intellect. Have you ever noticed that everywhere where the United States or this country goes into another country, the people start dressing like them, the people start listening to their music, they're infecting them. They're infecting them with that virus. And next thing you know, uproaring and war breaking out in those countries. They're going against the norm of their country, the traditions that they have for
Rebelling
thousands of
against-
generations. They begin to rebel and
Against
fight
life.
against it. They had a spiritual life, and now their spiritual life is dead. These Europeans are like a virus. Everywhere they go, they destroy. They bring death and destruction everywhere they go. And now that they have us, we thinking just like them. We're being just like them. We're acting just like them. And all we doing is killing each other just like them. Everywhere we go, we bring destruction. It's been a long time since the Hebrew man has actually lived the Hebrew lifestyle and been productive in bringing about change in the nation of Israel. Our brothers and sisters over in Dimona, they gave it a good shot. They gave it a hell of a shot. But they have failed also. Failed drastically. But we've been given an opportunity, as long as we have life within us, we're given an opportunity to change this. One way we have to change it and to reverse this curse, this spiritual death that is upon us, is to change our habits. Stop lying. Stop stealing. Stop cheating. Stop defrauding each other. Learn what the true definition and meaning of love and trust and truth is. Loyalty. Learn what it is. Because a lot of us have no idea what loyalty is. Some of us go to the highest bidder. We will work with somebody and be in cahoots with somebody for 10 years. As soon as somebody else come along and offer us more or something temporarily gratifying our soul, we out. We run. We could be in a relationship with somebody for a good 10, 20 years. But as soon as something prettier come about or we think is more attractive, the first thing we do is we run. And we can't see the ramifications of our decisions immediately. It's a process of time, because time is the true teller of all things. And then when you see the results, you're kicking yourself in the back, saying, oh, I wish I had not have done that. But then it's too late, because you've already made that decision. So these lessons are deep, and you really have to pay attention. If you feel the presence of the Creator leaving you, it might be that you have partaken in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It begins by altering the mind, and then it affects the body. Often by your appearance alone, one can tell where your mind is. If you dress in provocative clothes, you're a woman and you're always showing your cleavage, you feel like you got to show your cleavage so somebody, you just feel freer with somebody when you can show your cleavage. And somebody can see that part of your body.
You're crazy, man.
Your lower back or your stomach. As a woman, that is not modesty. Those things are not modest. And if you're dressing like that, chances are you are infected with that virus. As a man, you feel like you got to go out with your shirt open. You know what I mean? You got to look a certain type of way in order to bring attention to you from the world. You know, you don't allow the natural order of things with your hair and your facial hairs to grow, to be in alignment with the Almighty's truth. These are all signs of you being infected with that virus on a mental, spiritual level. If the Creator requires for you to dress different than everyone else, then that's what you do. If you wear regular clothes every day, wear your fringes. And people will start asking you, hey, what is that? Sometimes little kids be so afraid when other children ask them what their fringes are, they go to school and take them off. And when they get out of school, they put them back on so they can come home and act like they had them on all day. So that shows that your children is being infected as well. If you tell your children to wear garbs to school every day or throughout the rest of their lives, and your children find a problem with you telling them to dress culturally, that's a sign that they are infected. That's a sign. Because they don't want to stand out from the other children. So that shows you that they're on that level of being infected and having or receiving a spiritual death. They're on their way. And this is why it's best that you serve the Creator in your youth. In your youth, learn these habits, these traits, these customs, these traditions, and do them, implement them, because they're there for a reason. Modesty is of the utmost importance. By your conduct, one can tell which tree you are partaking of, the tree of life or the tree of evil. Even your speech and someone can give you away. But if you have learnt to hide very well, then the true teller is called to the testify, and he is called time. For time is the true teller of all things. You have within yourself the power to regain spiritual life. If you have been infected and find that you are either spiritually dead or dying, it has been said that the only part of the Bible you believe is the part of that you do in your life. The only part of the Bible that you believe is the part that you do. And if you don't do it, then it's because you don't believe it. Okay? So how do you reverse the curse of spiritual death? What are some of the things that needs to be done to reverse the curse of spiritual death?
Change your surroundings.
Change your surroundings, your environment. To what? Change it to what?
To more positive influences, you know.
To more positive influences. How do you know if the circle that you're in is negative? How would you know? Because if you're infected with the virus, you might not be able to see it. So what do you use as a parameter or a test to see if the circle that you're in is evil or negative?
I would say, you know, if you're a believer in the Most High, asking Him for things and seeing how, you know, how He responds. If you get it right away, or if there's resistance. Also, if you have friends who are, you know, believers in the Most High, and they start to tell you, you know, you're changing, or you know, they start to comment on certain things you're doing that are showing that you're, you know, going the opposite way.
Good. Remember in the lesson where I was teaching you about shedding, people who will be in your circle will begin to tease you, ridicule you, talk about you, make fun of you, separate themselves from you, because they're evil. They don't want to be around you if you're living righteously.
Right.
So if you got people that's doing negative and evil things and you don't have no problem with it, they don't have no problem with you, there's something wrong with you. You're spiritually dead or you're spiritually dying. Usually, if you're on this path to live a righteous life, those people who are now on that same path will shun you and want to be away from you and not with you.
Right.
All right? Are there any questions? All right. May the Most High be praised.
This lesson is from 2004.